Hey, what's up guys? capnbozzy here, and this is Mass Effect 3 Multiplayer and 7 Academy Part 20. And in this episode, we'll be covering the Geth Juggernaut Soldier, who is the primary tanking kit in the game. So let's check out his powers. So what makes the Geth Juggernaut really interesting is that there's a couple different ways to play him. So obviously if you look online, you may see a couple different strategies. Just keep in mind that this is a particular template that I'm offering to you. This is what I use and have tested it with Platinum, so I know it's viable. So depending on what gear and what weapons and everything that you have available, you can modify this kit as you need. And so just keep that in mind. There is a couple different ways to play him. This is just what I use and what I prefer, so do what works for you, work towards your strengths, and make sure to test this out, and don't be afraid to reset the powers and try something else. So let's jump into it here with the Hex Shield. So of course what the Hex Shield allows you to do is to just spawn a shield out into the field, and you can put this right in front of you. And of course if we look at first slot here, this allows you to block fast-moving projectiles, including bullets. So this allows you to quite literally shield yourself from anything coming into you, and obviously any of the enemies that you're going to be using your heavy melee on to be able to drain their shields, barriers, and health. This will allow you to put an extra barrier between you and them, just to help for some more crowd control. So I definitely suggest using the Hex Shield. It really comes in handy, especially when you're in Platinum. It's definitely necessary, and it's also really great because if you saw before in my N7 Paladin video, the shields, there's only two kits in this game that have shields, and that's of course the Paladin and the Jug. And you definitely want to be able to utilize this shield when your teammates are vulnerable, like when they're doing the 4-point hack objective. You can put the shield in front of them to shield them from any incoming projectiles, and this can really make a big difference, because if you find yourself in a really difficult situation where enemies are closing in from all angles depending on what map it is, and you're struggling to get those 4-point hacks in, having a Jug and him using his shield appropriately can make all the difference in the world, and can literally be the difference between you winning the game or wiping out. So make sure if you're using the Jug that you are using your Hex Shield appropriately. Use it defensively, and it really makes a huge difference. When you have a really good Jug on your team, it makes Platinum so much easier. So of course, I'll demonstrate this once we get into the game. Obviously, I'll just be playing by myself, so I won't be able to demonstrate, any of the team-oriented stuff. But I'll go into that into later videos. So just keep that in mind. Use the Hex Shield strategically, and it will make a huge difference for your team, helping out defensively. So let's move on here to rank 4. So we have Shield Strength versus Pulse. In my opinion, I like going with shield strength here. This will just allow it to stay active for the entire 18 seconds, and that's the duration here. It's really important that whenever you want it to stay up, like I said, if you're going to use it to to shield one of your teammates while they're doing a hack, then you definitely want it to stay up as long as it can for its full duration. In my opinion, that's more important than this electric pulse, and also I'm going to be compensating for not using this pulse as we go on to rank 5 here, because I'm gonna be using shock. So shock over duration. So this course duration increases it by 100%. Like I said, it's already at 18 seconds, so that's plenty of time for the shield to be up, because keep in mind, you are going to be redeploying the shield out into the field, as you're moving along. So 18 seconds is plenty of time to have your shield active, so you really don't need to waste it. With more duration. Shock, this is where you can use the shock to be able to get that more damage, and this effect can also be detonated, which is really great. In other words, it can prime enemies for tech bursts, and so that's really a big benefit there. And once again, that makes up for not using pulse. Alright, so then moving on to rank 6 here, we have large shield versus damage synergy. I personally use the large shield. I think it makes a big difference. If you're going to use the shield, might as well go all out, in my opinion. It increases the shield strength as well. So it just allows you to further the shield's function of, well, literally being a shield and, protecting you from incoming projectiles, putting a larger barrier between you and any of the bosses, as well as protecting your teammates when they're doing hacks or anything like that. So that is over, of course, damage synergy here. And of course, if you want to do damage synergy instead, that allows you to generate additional energy for all your systems to increase damage by 10%. We're going to be doing other things to increase your damage. So in my opinion, only 10% is not that big of a deal compared to having your increased shield strength by 40% as well as a larger shield. So I think, in my opinion, that's kind of a no-brainer that you want the larger shield. I see some guys using the Jug in the game, and it's a very widely used kit in the game. And I see them with the smaller shield, and usually it's just not big enough to really do its job. So I definitely suggest going with the larger shield. Alright, moving on to Siege Pulse here. So this is where we get into how you can really change your playstyle with the Jug. And this is the first part. And of course, the second part will be how you decide to spec your turret. And we'll go into that in a second. So, of course, with Siege Pulse, what it allows you to do is, unless you spec it to have 4 Siege Pulse shots, it's going to only have 3. So let's just say, in the beginning here, it generates 3 electric charges that are stored in your platform's batteries. You can use the power again to consume a charge to launch a long-range pulse that blasts a massive area. Each shot can incapacitate unarmored enemies. So what's really important with Siege Pulse, and the way that I like to use Siege Pulse, is completely offensively. I don't use it defensively, as in to increase my my shield strength, as you can in rank 5 here. So with rank 5, you have the ability to choose either damage protection. So each of the stored charges on your platform reduces all damage taken by 10%. So obviously, if you were to use the number of shots spec here to be able to get it up to 4, if you were going to use it defensively, then you could store up to 4 of these charges, and then your total amount of damage taken that you would be able to increase this would be 40%. So that's pretty significant if you want to use it in a defensive fashion. However, I think that Siege Pulse is much more effective used as a weapon offensively. It has the ability, as it said here, to incapacitate unarmored enemies, and that's a really great way to, to do mob control, crowd control, to be able to just knock any incoming enemies, mooks, husks, and cannibals, and things like that away from you. So it really helps us to keep mobs off of your team, and as well, it also does a lot of damage, and it can also it can detonate tech explosions, so like fire explosions, tech bursts, etc. So I'm going to be using the Rieger Carbine as well as the N7 Hurricane as my sidearm with this kit. So I'm going to be using, of course, incendiary ammo with my weapons to be able to do my own detonating for fire explosions. So how I'm going to be doing that, of course, is using my weapon, my ammo power, to prime for fire explosions. Then I'm going to be using Siege Pulse to detonate that fire explosion. And, as I'll show you once we get into the game, when I use Siege Pulse, I'm just firing it everywhere. I'm just, launching it, just trying to hit everything as fast as possible. Basically, as soon as the cooldown, is finished, I'll just keep shooting it out there. So to me, I use the Geth Juggernaut like a tank, as tanky as a role as you can play, just to do as much damage as possible, as well as soak up a ton of damage, so that you can just really be a huge force on the field for your team and take a lot of the weight off your shoulders of the rest of your teammates. So obviously the trade-off is that the Jug is really slow, and once I get into the gear, obviously you can use something like an adrenaline module, and that will help to offset that and make him a little bit faster. We'll get into that once we get into the gear with those different choices. So let's just finish this up here. So with Siege Pulse, of course, with rank 4, you have damage versus impact radius. I would say that you could go either way with this. I personally have damage spec for this build, but if you wanted to go with impact radius so that, you obviously you could hit enemies at a larger distance, that's definitely not a bad idea. From the way I usually use him though, 1.5 meters is fine, and that's because I really only do it from a close to medium range. I don't usually use Siege Pulse from too far away. Pretty much all the damage that I'm doing to enemies with the Jug is really close quarters to medium for the most part. So I think damage is more important in that regard. So then we have, of course, damage protection versus recharge speed. So like I said, I like to use Siege Pulse offensively, so I like to have as fast of a recharge speed as possible so that I can just keep launching those Siege Pulses out there to keep knocking down mooks and detonating tech explosions and things like that. So once again, if you're going to do this kit differently and have him be all about being as defensive as possible, then obviously damage protection would be the way to go. And then lastly here for rank 6, we got number of shots versus resistance damage. So once again, I definitely suggest going with number of shots. Really, if you're going with this kit either offensively or defensively. Obviously, if you're going defensively, this will give you that extra 10% damage taken bonus, so you'll have a little bit more defense for you. And then if you're using it offensively, you'll have 4 shots to fire out into the field rather than just 3. And this also, of course, increases the chance of knocking down enemies by 15%. That's really not that big of a deal. It's really all about having that, one more shot is definitely, really helpful. So I really suggest going with number of shots for rank 6. All right, and then moving on to the Geth turret here. So this is the another way that you can spec this kit completely differently. If you really want to make the Geth turret a much bigger factor in the field, obviously you can see here with my build, I only have the first 3 specced out. So if you really wanted to make the Geth turret a much bigger part of your strategy, then there's really 2 ways that you can spec this. And just like Siege Pulse, you can either spec your Geth turret to either be offensive or defensive. And of course, we can see here with rank 4 we have shields and damage. So of course this is all about increasing the turret's damage and resistance. So that's really if you want to go more offensive. And of course, if you wanted to go more defensive, as in using the turret to be able to restore your teammates' shields, then that's what you would go here with shield restore instead. So basically with all of these B functions for ranks 4, 5, and 6, these are all about defense and restoring your the shields of your teammates, whereas the A functions are all about if you want to use it offensively. So like I said, it's pretty straightforward here. If you wanted to do offensively, just go with all the A ranks here, and of course this is just more damage, and of course this gives it a flamethrower effect. Whereas with rank 4, it's more shields to allies, even more shields to allies, increasing the range, and even and more frequency of restoring shields. So it's really not a bad idea to do this. Like I said, this would basically be an entirely different build if you wanted to do it this way. It's definitely not a bad idea. It's just not the way I particularly use it. I don't use the turret all that much, and really that's because I just find that the first 3 are effective enough. And the truth is, when I play, I kind of forget about using the turret anyway, because it's just like your teammates don't need it all that much. It can be useful, obviously. There are times like when I'm playing with a different kit than the Jug, and I have a Jug on my team, and my shields go down, and it's a dangerous situation, and the Jug, I run past the Jug's turret, and it restores my shields, and I'm like, oh, thank God, thank you for that. But for the most part, your teammates are going to be doing their own thing. They'll be able to survive on their own without you being able to do this for them. So that's why I don't really use it, is because you can't control your teammates. They're going to do their own thing. And obviously, if you're going to be playing Platinum eventually, then your teammates need to be good enough to do that anyway. They need to be able to take care of themselves without you anyway. So that's why I don't really put that much into the Geth turret, because I feel like it's not my job to really babysit my teammates. I'm doing enough just by soaking up damage from bosses and doing my part offensively. So once again, that's up to you. If you want to try that out, go for it. Your teammates will certainly thank you for it, but obviously, if you put the points into Geth Turret, it's going to take away from your other stuff. So take that as you will. All right, so moving on to Geth Juggernaut here. So of course, this is with weapon damage versus basically your weight capacity and power damage and force bonuses. This is really pretty simple. This is just balancing out, you know, if you want more weapon damage and versus power bonuses. So just for rank 4, I'm going with weapon damage, and then for rank 5, I'm going with stability and ammo. Since I used a Rieger carbine, you know, I usually run out of ammo really fast with it, and especially on platinum, depending on the map, ammo can be really scarce. And since you're really slow with the Jug, your teammates are definitely going to get to the ammo crates faster than you pretty much all the time. So they're gonna steal whatever ammo is there. So you really got to you kind of got to scrounge for it, and it's kind of a problem if you're using something like the Rieger that is limited ammo. And that's really why I carry the Hurricane, because that's just my sidearm only if I run out of ammo with the Rieger, which does happen sometimes. So yeah, I use that over power damage. I think that with power damage, that really is just about the Siege Pulse. So I think Siege Pulse is good at it as it is. Doesn't really need anything else here. Obviously, with going back to rank 4, if you needed some more weight capacity to have a faster cooldown, that's not a bad idea either. And then, of course, if you're doing this a bit differently, you got your weapon weight versus more weapon damage. If you're using a Geth weapon, if you're using you know, something like I can't remember what it's called. What's it? The Geth Pulse Rifle, or what's the other weapon? Let me look here. I don't use either of those. So there's the Geth Pulse Rifle, and then there's the, let's see, what is it called? The Spitfire, that's right. I don't use the Spitfire either, but obviously if you're going to use either of those, then it's definitely not a bad idea to go with this weapon damage one. That'll just give you that extra little bonus there. So once again, I'll leave that up to you. Depends on what you're carrying. All right, and then lastly here for Hardened platform. Of course, this is all about you know, just your shields and your melee. So for rank 4, I'm going with durability here just to give me some more strength with my heavy melee, as well as some extra bonuses for my health and shields. And I'm using that over melee damage, and that's really because I'm covering the melee damage in the other ones here, in this last one. So then for rank 5, we have speed boost versus shield recharge. Having this increased movement speed every time you get a kill with a heavy melee is definitely pretty useful. So that's definitely a good idea, and you'll be restoring your shields anyway using your heavy melee. So I don't think you really need to do shield recharge over the speed boost. And then lastly here we have power transfer versus squad command. I really don't suggest using squad command. You already have the melee damage bonus here as well, so you can increase your shields restored by heavy melee by 50%. That's already better than this 30%. So having your allies within 4 meters of you, how often is that going to be, really? I mean, and it's only 10% more damage. It's really not worth it, in my opinion. You know, you're once again, you can't control your teammates. They're going to run around the map if they want. They're going to do whatever they need to do. So you're a lot slower than them. I really don't suggest using squad command. Power transfer just has so much. It's just so much better. I mean, health and shields by 75%. It's just really a no-brainer, in my opinion, for this one. All right, so that covers the build. So let's move on to weapons here. That covers the powers. Sorry. So like I said, I use the Rieger carbine as my primary weapon, and the N7 Hurricane as my sidearm. As for the mods I use, just like in all the other videos where I show you the Rieger, of course I use the spare thermal clip as well as the high velocity barrel. The high velocity barrel, quick note again, this increased weapon weight by 50 points here. It does not actually register in the game. That is a bug. So, you know, whatever your weapon weight is at, that is not going to be the same as it is actually in the game with this high velocity barrel. So just keep that in mind. And then for my N7 Hurricane, I just use the ultralight materials here just to reduce the weapon weight, and that will help make my power cooldowns faster. And also I just use the high caliber barrel for some extra damage. Alright, of course, if you don't have you know, the Rieger or the Hurricane, you can substitute those out, use different types of shotguns. I definitely suggest going with a shotgun. You could go, obviously, with any of the other shotguns that I usually recommend, like the Wraith or the Claymore or anything else like that. It just really comes down to what you have unlocked. And obviously, alternatively, you could go with one of the Geth weapons if you're going to go with that extra Geth weapon damage bonus, and you know, that's not a bad idea as well. Alright, so moving on to equipment here. Like I said, I'm going to be using these incendiary rounds, and this will help to prime for fire explosions that I will detonate with Siege Pulse. I definitely suggest going with any other type of tech ammo power if you don't have incendiary rounds. I only have 2s here, but normally, of course, I would use 3s or 4s. So you could also go with something like disruptor rounds or cryo rounds, and you know, that will help you to be able to prime the enemies for those tech explosions. And then depending on what weapon you're using, I'm using targeting VI, and this is what I always use with the Rieger, and that just helps to increase the headshot damage. Of course, you could also go with Strength Enhancer 3, and that just gives you this melee damage boost. Definitely not a bad idea at all. And also, you could also go with the you know, Shotgun Rail Amp, or if you have none of those, you could also go with the SMG Rail Amp if you're using something like the Hurricane as your sidearm. And then lastly here, you got a couple different choices for this last equipment slot. I'm going to go with the Berserker package, and this will give me extra shotgun damage as well as melee damage. Some other perfectly acceptable options would be going with the Hydraulic Joints, which gives you plus 20% melee damage. The Juggernaut Shield, which of course gives you extra shield strength and melee damage. Or of course you could go with the Shotgun Amp or the Shield Booster, depending on what you need. So basically what it comes down to is you want to go with either something that will boost your shields, boost your melee, or boost your shotgun damage if you're using a shotgun. That's what I personally suggest. And of course, you know, choose whatever makes sense according to your build and whatever you have unlocked. Alright, so that covers the entire build here. So let's jump into the game and then get this guy into action here.
Strategically significant target has been located. We got multiple enemies spotted. Secure the area.
Alright, so as you can see in the top left corner with my keybinds, for my Hex Shield, I personally use middle mouse or 3 to deploy that. And for my Siege Pulse, I use X, and then to deploy my turret, I have F. So as for my weapons, like I said, I've got the Rieger Carbine here as well as the N7 Hurricane. So like I said, what you really want to do with this incendiary ammo is be able to use the Rieger Carbine to prime enemies for fire explosions that you're going to use with your Siege Pulse. And I just, of course, turned on my Siege Pulse there, which puts those 4 charges that I have like on my right shoulder there. Alright, so I'm gonna... Well, I'm gonna burn through these guys so fast. So let's, let me wait till I get another Marauder, and then of course I'll do a fire explosion on them. Well, really, like I said, the way I use Siege Pulse, normally I would just be constantly, you know, firing Siege Pulse out into the field just to knock these enemies down, knock them away from me. And like I said, just keep recharging it whenever it goes out. And keep in mind that once you have the Siege Pulse on your shoulder there, you don't have to wait for it to cool down in order to shoot those Siege Pulse rounds. Alright, so I'm just going to keep on shooting these husks. Just keep them away from me, and then as soon as it goes down, just redeploy it again. Just keep using it. Just keep shooting it out there. So like I said, when it comes to tanking, you really just want to be an oncoming force. You know, just keep moving forward. You got plenty of health and shields, and whenever you need to, whenever you're, you know, you get hit a little bit or your shield goes down, obviously you can just use your heavy melee to be able to drain the health shields and barriers of any of the enemies here. And you also do have a pretty decent light melee, and which I'll show you right now. So it's just kind of a, you know, just like a little pulse there that knocks the enemies away from you. So once again, there's just using the heavy melee to completely drain that Marauder's health. And of course you can use your turret there just to throw it out into the field, and that will help to distract enemies and just you know, do some extra damage to them. And also, if you're, of course, if I was playing on a team, really what I would be using the turret for is just to throw it around my teammates just to help restore their shields. So I'll just wait, actually, until I get one of the bosses or sub-bosses to do the Siege Pulse and Fire Explosion on them, because these guys are just dying so quickly. Alright, so I should get some brutes in this round that I can demonstrate that on. And remember, I also have this spec so that whenever I kill an enemy, I do have a slight 15% speed boost for, I think it was 45 seconds or something like that. So that's something you want to keep in mind. You definitely want to keep using your heavy melee to kill enemies whenever you can, so you can, you know, take them down a little bit there and then kill them, just so that you can continually get that speed boost. Alright, so with this brute here, like I said, I'm going to hit him with the Rieger Carbine to prime him for the fire explosion, and then bam, you can see that. So what I definitely should have done there, obviously, I was talking so I wasn't paying attention too much, is, so now I'm out of ammo, so I'm going to switch over to my Hurricane here as my sidearm. And there you go, there's another fire explosion there. What I was saying earlier is I definitely should have been more careful with that. Obviously, soloing, you're going to be a lot more vulnerable here, so I either should have put up a hex shield, or obviously I should have been more aware in my shield going down and you know, using my heavy melee to restore my shields. So once I get to the next round, and that will of course be an objective round, and I'll also get some Banshees, I'll be able to demonstrate using the Hex Shield in a much better capacity. If I do it right now, it's not really when I would typically do it, so I'll just show you that next round. Alright, so once again here, prime that brute for that fire explosion and detonate it with Siege Pulse. There you go. Same thing again. And just keep redeploying Siege Pulse as soon as it goes down. And also at the end of rounds, or whenever there's lulls, definitely not a bad idea to just shoot out your remaining siege pulses so that you can just restore it up to the maximum with 4. As you can see, as I did at the end of the round there. Okay, so once I get to this point, I'm going to throw up a shield, and this will just help to keep me protected here. So I'm going to put up the hex shield here. So now I can use that to hide behind, and anything coming over from that left side is not going to hit me. I also want to use this hex shield to keep this Banshee behind me so I can help manage mana churning, do that crowd control. All right. Alright, so like usual, we're gonna strip the Banshee shields with your Rieger, and of course I have my Hex shield up, and that's just to block those Banshee biotic balls there. Alright, so strip her shields, throw up your Hex shield to block the impact of that biotic ball. You can stay behind it. Give you some extra cover, and of course just use the Rieger here. Perfect. Primer for fire explosion and detonate it with siege pulse. All right. Well, I actually didn't. I'll use the turret a little bit. Okay. Well, that's gonna wrap up this video. I hope you found it helpful. Of course, if you have any questions, let me know in the comments, and I will see you next time when we cover the N7 Shadow Infiltrator. So, thanks a lot for watching, and I'll see you next time. capnbozzy out.